It was just another day at the mall, with shoppers coming and going, and store clerks busy attending to their customers. However, as the day went on, the sky grew darker, and the wind started picking up, indicating that a storm was on its way. Despite the looming storm, the mall management decided to keep the mall open for anyone who needed shelter. Most shoppers, however, decided to seek safety elsewhere and left the mall. But a few people remained, including a group of coworkers from a nearby office. As they were getting ready to leave, an announcement came over the mall's intercom, urging everyone to take shelter immediately. They hesitated for a moment, but as the storm grew more intense, they realized they had no choice but to stay put. The storm hit suddenly and with ferocity. The doors to the mall were blown open by a fierce gust of wind, and rain started pouring in. The group of coworkers rushed to secure the doors, but it was too late. The storm had arrived, and it was more severe than they had anticipated. The group hurried to the nearest shelter and huddled together as the storm raged outside. But the shelter was no match for the storm, and the water soon started seeping in. Within minutes it was ankle deep, and the group realized with horror that they were trapped. As the water continued to rise, the group moved to higher levels of the mall, hoping to find a safer place to wait out the storm. But the water kept rising, and soon they found themselves stranded on the upper levels of the mall, with no way to escape. The mall management tried to reassure everyone that they had enough supplies to last for weeks. But as the days went by, it became clear that they were running out of food and water. Tempers flared, and arguments broke out over who should get what little was left. But as the group struggled to survive, they began to realize that they were not alone. Something was lurking in the murky depths of the flooded mall, waiting to strike. They heard strange noises coming from the darkness, something like a low growl or a hiss. And then, one night, it struck. One of the coworkers, John, had ventured down to the lower levels of the mall to search for more supplies when he was attacked. He never came back, and the remaining coworkers could only hear his screams echoing through the empty corridors. Fear took hold of them, and they barricaded themselves in their makeshift shelters, hoping to keep the creature out. But as the water rose higher and higher, they knew that it was only a matter of time before the creature found a way to get to them. The group knew that they had to come up with a plan and fast. They spent their days devising traps and weapons, hoping to fend off the creature. They knew that their chances of survival were slim, but they refused to give up. And then, one night, the creature struck again. It was bigger this time and more aggressive. It smashed through the barricades with ease, and the group could only watch in horror as it dragged one of them away. They rallied together, using everything they had learned to fight back against the creature. It was a fierce battle, but in the end, they emerged victorious. As the floodwaters began to recede, the group emerged from the mall, battered and bruised, but alive. They looked around at the destruction and devastation, realizing that they had been lucky to survive. They knew that they would never forget what they had been through, and they would always be haunted by the memory of the creature that had lurked in the murky depths of the flooded mall. The survivors would later learn that the creature was a large alligator that had been living in the nearby river before the flood. The alligator had been displaced by the rising waters and had sought refuge in the mall's flooded lower levels. It had been hungry and disoriented and had attacked the survivors out of desperation. The mall's management had known about the alligator but had failed to warn the remaining survivors, fearing that it would cause more panic. They had hoped that animal control would be able to remove it, but the floodwaters had made it impossible for them to reach the mall. The survivors were outraged when they learned the truth, but they were grateful to be alive. They banded together and demanded that the mall management be held accountable for their negligence. In the end, the management was forced to pay for the survivors' medical bills and to make changes to their emergency preparedness plans. The survivors, however, would never forget the terror they had experienced. Some of them developed a fear of water, while others had nightmares about the alligator for years to come. But they also became closer, bonded by their shared experience of survival. They knew that they had been lucky to make it out alive, and they vowed to never take their safety for granted again. It was just another ordinary day at the sprawling mall of the city. People went about their business, shopping, eating, and socializing. But things were about to take a dark turn. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging the entire mall into darkness. The escalators stopped moving, and the elevators were stuck between floors. Panic set in among the shoppers, who quickly realized they were trapped inside. At first, people tried to remain calm, thinking that the power outage would be fixed soon. But as time passed, it became apparent that they were in for a long night. The only light came from emergency backup generators, casting a dim glow that barely illuminated the vast expanse of the mall. As the hours ticked by, the shoppers began to realize that they were not alone. There was a sense of unease, a feeling that something was watching them from the shadows. Footsteps could be heard in the darkness, but when anyone called out, there was no answer. As the night wore on, the shoppers began to realize that something was terribly wrong. They formed groups for safety, huddling together in small clusters as they tried to figure out what was happening. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the mall, causing everyone to freeze in fear. The scream was followed by a sickening thud, as if something heavy had fallen to the ground. The shoppers looked around, trying to see what had caused the noise, but the darkness made it impossible. It was at that moment that they realized they were being hunted. There was a presence in the mall, something that was stalking them one by one. And as the night wore on, the shoppers would come face to face with the sinister force that had trapped them inside. As the group banded together to survive, they quickly realized that they needed to uncover the dark history of the mall and the chilling secrets hidden within its walls before it was too late. But time was running out, and the darkness was closing in. One of the shoppers, a woman named Lisa, tried to keep calm as the situation grew more and more dire. She clutched her cell phone tightly, hoping that the battery would last long enough to call for help. But as she looked around, she could see that the other shoppers were growing increasingly panicked. A man named David suggested that they try to find a way out of the mall. "There has to be a door or a window somewhere that we can break open," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Lisa nodded in agreement, and the group set out to explore the dark corridors of the mall. They walked cautiously, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The only sound was the shuffling of their feet on the tiled floor. As they turned a corner, Lisa heard a strange noise. It sounded like someone breathing, but the sound was too heavy, too labored to be human. She held up her phone, using it as a makeshift flashlight, and saw a figure looming in the darkness. It was a man, but there was something wrong with him. His eyes were wide and vacant, and his clothes were torn and stained with blood. He shuffled towards them, his hands outstretched, and Lisa could see that he was covered in scratches and bite marks. "Stay back," David shouted, holding up a chair as a makeshift weapon. But the man kept coming, his movements slow and deliberate. As he got closer, Lisa could see that there was something else wrong with him. His skin was turning gray, and his eyes had a sickly yellow glow. The group realized with horror that the man was no longer human. He was one of the infected, a victim of some kind of virus or disease that was turning people into monsters. They backed away, their hearts pounding with fear. The infected man lunged at them, and David swung the chair, hitting him in the head with a sickening crunch. The man fell to the ground, but he didn't stay down for long. He began to twitch and convulse, his body writhing in agony as the virus took hold. The group backed away, but they knew that they couldn't outrun the infected forever. They needed to find a way out of the mall, and fast. But as they continued to search for an exit, they realized that there was something else lurking in the darkness, something even more terrifying than the infected. They heard a low growling noise and turned to see a pack of feral dogs, their eyes glowing in the darkness. The dogs advanced slowly, their teeth bared, and the group realized that they were trapped between two deadly forces. The infected man was slowly getting back to his feet, and the pack of dogs was closing in. Lisa's heart raced as she realized that they were running out of options. She looked around, searching desperately for a way out, but all she could see were dark, empty corridors stretching endlessly before them. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, they heard a sound. It was a faint humming noise, like a generator starting up. They followed the sound, and it led them to a service door that had been hidden in the shadows. David pulled open the door, and they were greeted by a blast of cold air. It was a service corridor leading to the outside of the mall. They hurried through the door, slamming it shut behind them, and ran towards the sound of the generator. As they got closer, they saw a group of workers huddled around a portable generator, their faces tired and scared. "We've been trying to get this thing started all night," one of them said, relief evident in his voice. The group of shoppers collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath. They were grateful to be out of the darkness, but they knew that their ordeal was far from over. They needed to find a way to get help, to call the authorities and tell them what was happening inside the mall. But as they huddled together, catching their breath and planning their next move, they heard a noise. It was a soft scratching sound, like something dragging across the ground. They looked up and saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was a woman, but she was unlike any woman they had ever seen before. Her skin was pale and sickly, and her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. She was wearing a tattered dress, and her hair hung in long, greasy strands around her face. The woman shuffled towards them, her movements slow and deliberate. As she got closer, they could see that her hands were covered in blood, and her mouth was twisted into a grotesque, inhuman grin. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that this woman was even more dangerous than the infected. She was something else entirely, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. The group backed away, but the woman kept coming, her eyes fixed on them with a hungry intensity. They knew that they couldn't outrun her, that they needed to stand and fight. David grabbed a piece of metal pipe from the ground, and the others looked around for weapons. They found a broken broom handle and a fire extinguisher, and they prepared to face the woman. She lunged at them, her movements lightning fast. David swung the pipe, hitting her in the head with a sickening thud. The woman fell to the ground, but she didn't stay down for long. She got back to her feet, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The group knew that they needed to take her down for good, but they didn't know how. They had no weapons that could kill her, no way to stop her. But then Lisa remembered something. She had read about the history of the mall, and she knew about a secret room hidden deep in the basement. It was said to contain ancient artifacts, things that were said to have the power to banish evil spirits. They knew that they needed to find the room, to find a way to stop the woman once and for all. But the room was deep in the bowels of the mall, and they knew that it would be a perilous journey to get there. They set out, their hearts pounding with fear. They encountered more infected, more packs of feral dogs, and even more terrifying monsters as they made their way through the dark corridors. But they pressed on, driven by a fierce determination to survive. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they found the secret room. It was hidden behind a false wall, and it was filled with ancient artifacts from a long-forgotten civilization. They searched through the artifacts, looking for something that could banish the woman. And then Lisa found it. It was a small amulet, inscribed with strange symbols and glowing with an otherworldly light. She knew instinctively that this was what they had been looking for. The group hurried back to where they had left the woman, knowing that time was running out. They found her waiting for them, her eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. David stepped forward, holding the amulet in his hand. He raised it up, and a bright light filled the room. The woman screamed, her body writhing in agony as the power of the amulet washed over her. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The group breathed a collective sigh of relief. They had done it. They had survived the nightmarish ordeal in the mall and had defeated the evil that had been hunting them. But as they looked around, they realized that they were still trapped inside the mall. The power was still out, and they had no way to call for help. Lisa remembered something else she had read about the mall. There was an emergency broadcast system, a way to contact the outside world in case of a disaster. They set out to find the system, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they were one step closer to getting out. They searched through the dark, empty corridors, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. And then, just when they thought they would never find it, they heard a voice. It was crackly and distorted, but they could make out the words. It was an emergency broadcast, warning people to stay away from the mall. The group felt a sense of relief flood over them. They had made contact with the outside world, and help would be on the way soon. But as they waited for rescue, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows. They knew that they needed to stay alert, to stay ready for anything. And then, just as they were beginning to relax, they heard a sound. It was a faint scratching noise, coming from somewhere deep in the mall. They looked at each other, fear etched on their faces. They knew that they were not alone in the mall, that there was still something out there, waiting for them. They huddled together, their hearts racing as they waited for the sound to come closer. And then suddenly, the scratching stopped. There was a long, tense silence, and the group waited, their muscles tensed, ready for whatever came next. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the power came back on. The lights flickered to life, and the escalator started moving again. The group looked around, disbelieving. They had made it through the night, and they were still alive. As they made their way out of the mall, they realized that they had been changed by the experience. They had faced their deepest fears and had come out on the other side, stronger and more determined than ever before. And as they walked out into the sunlight, they knew that they would never forget the horrors they had faced in the mall, the things that had hunted them in the darkness, and the secrets that had been hidden within its walls. In the heart of a bustling city stood the Blackstone Mall, a popular shopping destination for locals and tourists alike. On a busy Saturday afternoon, the mall buzzed with activity. Families, friends, and lone shoppers filled its halls, each seeking the perfect purchase. Nina, a 26-year-old pharmacist, was having her lunch break at the mall's food court, savoring a delicious burger from her favorite food stall. As she took another bite, she noticed people milling around in a panic. Mall security officers appeared and began ushering shoppers and employees out of the building. "There's been a gas leak. Please evacuate the premises immediately," one officer announced through a megaphone. Confused and scared, the crowd moved towards the nearest exits, filtering into the large parking lot outside. In the chaos, Nana found herself standing near a group of mall employees. Among them was a tall, middle-aged man with graying hair and a serious expression. She later learned he was Martin, the mall's head of security. As they waited for the all clear, some people began to experience strange symptoms. Nana felt her head pounding and her stomach churning. She heard others complaining about dizziness, nausea, and difficulty breathing. Fearful whispers spread throughout the crowd. What was going on? Martin took charge, ordering his security team to assess the situation and contact emergency services. As they waited for help to arrive, the symptoms only seemed to worsen. Some people collapsed, convulsing on the ground, while others vomited uncontrollably. Panic began to set in as the affected individuals cried out in pain and terror. Nina, who was struggling to remain conscious, managed to notice something peculiar. A thin, nearly imperceptible haze hung in the air, and she realized that the gas had somehow followed them outside. As she shared her observation with Martin, he frowned, deep in thought. It didn't make sense, unless this was no ordinary gas leak. As the minutes ticked by, people began to suspect that someone was trying to kill them. The atmosphere in the parking lot grew tense, with accusations and paranoia flying in every direction. Martin's security team did their best to maintain order, but the situation was spiraling out of control. Emergency services finally arrived, and paramedics began tending to the afflicted. Meanwhile, a hazardous materials team suited up and ventured inside the mall to investigate the source of the gas. As the situation stabilized, Martin and Nina exchanged information, both eager to get to the bottom of the mystery. The hazmat team returned with troubling news. The gas leak wasn't an accident. It was a carefully orchestrated attack. They had discovered an intricate system of pipes and valves hidden in the mall's walls, funneling the gas throughout the building. But who was responsible, and why? As the investigation continued, Martin and Nana worked together to identify a possible motive. They discovered that the mall had been plagued by a series of mysterious accidents over the past few months. Small fires, electrical malfunctions, and even a collapsed ceiling. At the time, these incidents seemed unrelated, but now they appeared to be part of a larger sinister plan. Nina's pharmacy had been one of the businesses affected by the accidents. As she delved into her memories, she recalled a disgruntled customer who had threatened her after she had refused to sell him a dangerous concoction of prescription drugs. The man had been tall and middle-aged, with graying hair and an eerily familiar face. As the pieces fell into place, Nina felt her blood run cold. The man she had refused to serve was none other than Martin, the mall's head of security. He had orchestrated the entire series of accidents, culminating in the gas leak. His ultimate goal was to take revenge on Nina and the other mall employees who had thwarted his attempts to acquire the drugs he sought. It was a twisted, dangerous game he had been playing, and now that his true identity was exposed, there was no telling what he would do next. Nina shared her suspicions with the authorities, who quickly apprehended Martin for questioning. They found evidence of his involvement in the attacks, blueprints of the mall's layout, lists of employees he deemed responsible, and detailed plans for each accident. It was a horrifying discovery that sent chills down the spines of everyone involved. As Martin was taken into custody, the mall's employees and shoppers tried to come to terms with the terrifying events they had just experienced. The Blackstone Mall would never be the same, forever marked by the sinister actions of one vengeful man. In the aftermath, Nina struggled to regain a sense of normalcy in her life. She continued working at the pharmacy, but the fear and paranoia lingered. Every time the mall's fire alarm went off or a pipe burst, her heart raced, and she wondered if it was another attack. She sought therapy to cope with the trauma and eventually found solace in helping others who had experienced similar horrors. The Blackstone Mall gas leak became a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most mundane places. And as for Martin, his twisted thirst for revenge had not only destroyed countless lives but also sealed his own fate. He would spend the rest of his days behind bars, haunted by the memories of the suffering he had caused. It was a Saturday evening, and a group of 5 friends decided to go shopping at the new mall that had recently opened on the outskirts of town. The mall was located in a remote area surrounded by dense woods, and it was known for its unique and somewhat eerie architecture. The group of friends, consisting of John, Rachel, Mark, Emily, and Lisa, were excited to explore the new mall and see what it had to offer. As they entered the mall, they were amazed by its grandeur and the sheer size of the building. The mall had several floors, and it was filled with shops, restaurants, and entertainment venues. The group of friends split up to explore the mall, agreeing to meet back at the main entrance after an hour. As the hour passed, the friends regrouped at the entrance, but they found that the doors were locked. They tried to push them open, but they wouldn't budge. The mall had closed, and they were trapped inside. Panic set in as they realized that they were locked in for the night. They searched for a way out, but every door was locked, and there were no windows to escape from. The group was left with no choice but to wait until morning. As they settled in for the night, they noticed that the mall was eerily quiet. There were no sounds of the usual hustle and bustle of a mall, no music and no chatter. It was as if the mall was dead. That's when they started to notice something strange. In every shop window, there was a mannequin. But these were not ordinary mannequins. They were lifelike, with expressions that seemed almost human. And as the group walked through the mall, they realized that the mannequins were watching them, following their every move. The friends tried to shake off the eerie feeling, convincing themselves that it was just their imagination playing tricks on them. But the feeling persisted, and they couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being watched. As they continued to explore the mall, they stumbled upon a small shop at the end of a long corridor. It was dimly lit, and the group could barely make out the strange-looking mannequins that lined the shelves. The shop seemed out of place, almost as if it was a part of a different era. Suddenly, they heard a creaking sound, and they turned around to see the shop's owner, a tall and lanky man with an unnerving smile, standing at the entrance. The man introduced himself as Mr. White, the owner of the mall, and he invited the group to explore his shop. Reluctantly, the group followed him inside, and they were immediately struck by the eerie atmosphere of the shop. The mannequins seemed to be alive, and their expressions were even more lifelike than the others they had seen in the mall. As they wandered through the shop, they noticed something strange. The mannequins seemed to be moving ever so slightly, as if they were trying to communicate with them. And then, in the corner of their eye, they saw a mannequin move. They turned around to see the mannequin staring at them, its expression changing from a smile to a scowl. The friends started to panic, and they tried to leave the shop, but the doors were locked. It was then that Mr. White revealed his true intentions. The mannequins were not just lifelike. They were alive. Mr. White had created them, and he had imbued them with life. And now, he wanted to add the friends to his collection. The friends were trapped, surrounded by Mr. White's eerie creations. They knew that they had to find a way out, but every door was locked, and Mr. White was blocking their only exit. They were trapped, with no way out. As they looked around, they noticed that the mannequins were closing in on them, their eyes following their every move. The friends could feel their heartbeats racing as they realized that they were in grave danger. Mr. White laughed maniacally, reveling in the fear that he had instilled in them. He explained that he had always been fascinated by mannequins and had spent years perfecting his craft of creating lifelike replicas. But he was never satisfied with just creating inanimate objects. He wanted to create something truly alive, something that would never age, never die. And he had succeeded in doing just that. The friends were horrified as they realized the true extent of Mr. White's madness. He was a man obsessed with creating life, no matter the cost, and they were now caught in the middle of his twisted experiment. As they searched for a way out, they stumbled upon a hidden room filled with tools and equipment used to create the mannequins, and then they saw it. A diary filled with Mr. White's thoughts and musings on his experiments. They read in horror as they learned about the sacrifices he had made to create his mannequins, the people he had kidnapped and experimented on to perfect his craft. The diary was a chronicle of a madman's descent into darkness, and the friends knew that they had to escape before they became his next victims. The group frantically searched for a way out, but every door was locked. Mr. White was closing in on them, his maniacal laughter echoing through the empty halls. In a last-ditch effort to escape, the friends came up with a plan. They would use the equipment in the hidden room to create their own mannequins, convincing Mr. White that they had become a part of his collection. As they worked, they could feel Mr. White's presence looming over them, watching their every move. But they persisted, working quickly and quietly to create their mannequins. Finally, they were finished. They placed their mannequins alongside the others, and Mr. White approached, grinning from ear to ear. But as he inspected the new additions to his collection, he failed to notice the subtle differences. The friends had rigged their mannequins with hidden weapons, and as soon as Mr. White was within reach, they struck. In the flurry of action, the friends attacked, using their weapons to take down Mr. White and his mannequins. They fought for their lives, determined to escape this nightmare. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they emerged victorious. Mr. White was defeated, and the mannequins were destroyed. The friends stumbled out of the mall, exhausted but alive. It was a beautiful Saturday morning when the newly opened Crystal Mall in the heart of the city was welcoming its first visitors. The mall was a sight to behold with its crystal clear glass walls and beautiful mirrored architecture that reflected the sunlight in the most stunning way possible. People were excited to explore the mall's many stores, grab a bite at the food court, and enjoy the day with their friends and family. Among the visitors was Anna, a young woman in her mid-20s. She had been looking forward to the mall's opening for months and had spent the morning getting ready, picking out her best outfit and applying her makeup perfectly. As she walked through the mall's entrance, she was struck by its beauty. The walls seemed to shimmer, and the reflections of the people around her looked like works of art. Anna walked into a store and began browsing the clothes racks, but as she turned to leave, she saw her reflection in the mirror. Something was wrong with it. Her face looked distorted, and her features seemed to be melting off. Anna gasped and stepped back, bumping into a nearby man who was also looking at his reflection. The man's reflection grabbed him and pulled him into the mirror, leaving nothing behind but a blood stain on the floor. Anna was horrified and ran out of the store, trying to find a way out of the mall. But as she ran, the mirror seemed to distort her reflection even more, making her look like a monster. She could hear the screams of other shoppers around her, and she knew that something was very wrong with the mall. Meanwhile, a group of friends, consisting of Jack, Emily, and Michael, had also come to the mall to spend the day together. Jack was an outgoing and adventurous guy. Emily was more reserved and quiet, and Michael was the joker of the group. As they walked through the mall, they were struck by its beauty, but something about it made them feel uneasy. As they entered a store, they noticed that their reflections looked strange. Jack's reflection looked like a monster, Emily's looked like a ghost, and Michael's looked like a twisted version of himself. They tried to brush it off as a trick of the light, but as they left the store, they saw a woman being dragged into a broken mirror, never to be seen again. The group was terrified and tried to find a way out, but every turn they took seemed to lead them deeper into the mall's maze. The mirrors grew more distorted and terrifying by the minute, and the group began to lose hope. Anna stumbled upon the group, and they banded together, trying to find a way out. They saw other survivors along the way, all with distorted reflections and stories of their own. Some were broken, unable to face their darkest fears, while others fought through the terror, determined to make it out alive. As they reached the exit, they were met by the mall's security, who informed them that the mall was built on an ancient burial ground. The mirrors had been used as a tool for sacrificial rituals, and the spirits of the sacrificed were still trapped within the walls, seeking revenge on the living. The survivors made it out alive, but the terror of that day stayed with them forever. Anna was traumatized by what she had seen and couldn't look at herself in the mirror without feeling a deep sense of dread. Jack, Emily, and Michael were haunted by the strange reflections and knew that they had faced something beyond their wildest nightmares. The Crystal Mall remained closed, a reminder of the horrors that had occurred within its walls, and the survivors knew that they had faced something that could never be explained or forgotten. They were left with only their memories and a deep sense of unease, wondering what other dark secrets and horrors lay hidden in the world around them. As news of the Crystal Mall incident spread, it became a topic of widespread discussion and speculation. Many people wondered about the connection between the strange reflections in the mirrors and the ancient burial ground that the mall was built on. Some believed that the spirits of the sacrificed had been awakened by the construction of the mall and had sought revenge on the living. Others dismissed the idea as mere superstition and believed that there was a more rational explanation for what had happened. The survivors of the Crystal Mall incident, however, knew that there was no rational explanation for what they had experienced. They had seen things that defied explanation and had faced terrors beyond their wildest nightmares. They knew that the world was full of hidden horrors and secrets, and that sometimes the past could come back to haunt the present in unexpected ways. Anna, Jack, Emily, and Michael remained friends after the incident and often talked about what had happened. They never forgot the horrors they had faced, but they also knew that they had been lucky to make it out alive. They learned to appreciate life more, knowing that it could be snatched away in an instant. As for the Crystal Mall, it remained closed, a dark and silent reminder of the horrors that had occurred within its walls. The owners of the mall never spoke about what had happened and tried to bury the incident as deeply as possible, but the survivors knew that the mall would always be a part of their lives, a reminder of the terrors that lurked beneath the surface of the world. In the end, the Crystal Mall incident became a cautionary tale, a reminder that sometimes the past could come back to haunt the present, and that the world was full of dark and hidden secrets. The survivors of the incident knew that they would never forget what had happened, but they also knew that they had faced their darkest fears and had come out stronger on the other side.